And today he'll be going over vectorizing in Flexi, taking those bitmap images and making them a little nicer, a little better looking. So if you have something really pixelated, it'll help you make that image look a little nicer. So he's geared this toward those that are just starting out using Flexi or getting into vectorizing. And for those of you that have been doing this for a long time, he's got some more advanced tips and tricks as well that he'll be showing you throughout the course of the presentation. And then after the presentation is over, we will have a question and answer session. So you can go ahead and type any questions that you have in the chat window on the bottom there, and we'll try and answer as many of those as we can. Those can be either about vectorizing, or if you have any other questions that you've just been wondering about Flexi, Aaron is the man to answer all of those. And we will be recording today's webinar. So if you have to step out for a moment, or if you'd like to share this with someone else, we will be posting the recording on the SAI YouTube channel, and we will send everyone who registered for the webinar a link to that recording as well, so you can review it whenever you like. And I think that's everything, so we'll turn it over to Aaron.
All right, sounds good. So, the topic of vectorizing can be kind of interesting one. It's one of those ones that can definitely save some time. And so we kind of wanted to just go over some of the key ones that that I use and that most people would use, and kind of go over some topics that a couple different images. So I've got, if I zoom out here, I've got several different images here that we're going to kind of work on, ranging from this one here that's really, it's okay, but you can definitely tell it's got some problems. We've got a super pixelated image over here, and then we have something a little more like this, which is just kind of really crazy. And then we've got something a little bit smoother, but it's in color. So let's start out with something simple here. Let's just take this guy, and then we'll work on that one for now. But you're going to find all of your vectorizing tools underneath the bitmap menu. And that's going to be under Vectorize. And you're going to see several different options here. I'm going to kind of briefly go over these, kind of give you a general idea of what they're about. So the auto trace is very simple. It's a black and white auto tracer. It won't do any colors or anything. Well, I mean, it can, but the idea is that you're usually going to use this with black and white, and then the color trace is essentially the same tool, just with color, the option for color. There's a couple others here, the centerline trace and the picture cut. We're probably not going to deal with those, mainly because they're kind of a more of a niche type use. And then you have these three down here. These are kind of an interesting ones, but you have a vectorizer that's based off the Bezier tool, and then you have enhanced curves and enhanced corners. Enhanced corners and curves, enhanced curves gives you a predefined set of settings that works fairly generically well, and then enhanced corners actually allows you to dial in those settings a little bit more. And so we'll jump into this one here as we go along. We'll kind of show what some of the differences are between some of these. So let's just get started with a straight up auto trace. So we're just going to click on auto trace, and it will auto trace immediately after you highlight the selected object. And so one of the things that we're going to want to do is just take a look at our Design Central here, and we can change our settings for noise reduction, how much the software changes rounded objects into corners and sharp edges. We can change the resolution here. Typically, I always do full, so it's always at full scale. And then the tolerance. The tolerance here is an interesting one. It's basically you're giving the software how much permission you're giving the software. So the higher this number, the more permission it has to overwrite stuff. 50% is a pretty decent setting, but depending on what you're doing, you may want to play with this a little bit and see what happens. I'm going to leave this everything at default for now, and I'm just going to see how this comes out. So I just highlighted there, I just dragged and highlighted over it, and it immediately did it for me. So I'm going to now exit the tool and I'm going to zoom in. And the first thing you're going to need to do is just select out on this blank area here where the bitmap is so that I can drag it out of the way. So we can see here that this did a pretty respectable job at converting this fairly low resolution image, 72 pixels per inch, so pretty low quality image, and gave us something kind of meaningful here. So there are a few issues that I have though. Um, when you look at this image, there's a lot of blurry, kind of weird stuff going on here that causes some issues when it's vectorizing. So for example, here in this little area here, it seemed to have made those really sharp. And then our flat lines are really not flat lines anymore. And then kind of at the end here, yeah, this is meh. It's okay. I mean, it's okay. There's a lot of blurry stuff going on at the end of this image here that can cause that to get messed up. So we can make some adjustments. So let's go in here. We're just going to do the auto trace again. I'm going to try and do a normal amount of noise reduction. I'm going to give it maybe up the tolerance a little bit. And let's do more sharp corners. And then we'll do the same thing and see how that changes. Again, I'm going to drag my bitmap out of the way. So you can kind of see it did okay on some things. It seems to have not done as well on this area down here. So you can see how different settings might affect it a little more. I think we gave a little bit too much tolerance, and I kind of wanted to do that intentionally, but I gave a little too much tolerance, and it kind of took itself and went a little too free on this guy here. You can see one of these that actually completely just rounded that one off. So, there's some good things and bad things. So how can I make this a little bit better? Well, I'm going to go and I'm going to use one of my other vectorizing tools. The nice thing about the Bezier one is this will do color and black and white, but you're going to get a lot smoother, easier corners. So it's all based off of the Bezier tool, which tends to have very smooth corners. So if I click on Bezier, there really isn't any parameters. It kind of just has a pre-configured set of settings that it uses, and that's it. So if I move this up, one thing to note that is different about the auto trace is that you're going to get just straight lines versus the Bezier tool and some of the other tools. You're actually going to get like a filled object. So that's also something that may be important to you, is to have the fill. For a more visual, if you were printing this or doing something else with it, you may want that fill, and that's something that the other tools will give you versus the auto trace. So if we pull in here, I do kind of like overall what it's done to the end here. There might be a few little things we might want to correct in here, nothing major though. And we can kind of see that overall it's actually smoothed out these really well, and it did a really good job at smoothing out these corners here, but still maintaining some of these sharp edges that were in this original file. These are obviously meant to be sharp, and so it really did a good job of keeping those sharp there. And like the points in these here. Now it looks like we would have to maybe come in here and correct this a little bit, something that could be very easily done in the point editing tools. A little plug, if you didn't get to see our point editing tools video or webinar, go back and check that out. This would be really easily fixable with those point editing tools. We could make that match up with this really easily. But, and fixing little small things like that. So honestly, the difference there, depending on what you want to do, this Bezier tool might do the trick for you. One other little hint or little trick here, this is kind of more for an advanced user as well, but let's take this image and see if we can make this image a little bit better. So one of the things that you can do is you could come in here and you can resample this image. Now, basically what resampling does is it takes the existing pixels and either adds more pixels and or rearranges them to kind of fix the image a little bit. So it's a computer generated thing. So sometimes it's not always going to make the right judgment calls, but the idea is to kind of help smooth off some of the edges. So I'm going to take this image, and originally it has 400 by 159 pixels. Let's just say earlier I tested this out with 3000 pixels, and I'm going to do that proportionally and hit OK. And what this is going to do is this kind of smooth off the edges. Now everything kind of looks a little bit softer, and it kind of gets rid of some of that around the edges here. But it kind of smooths off some of the objects. So now if we go back to the auto trace on this guy, we're going to move the bitmap out of the way, and then let's just drag this over here to make a kind of a little bit better comparison here. Kind of look at these two together. Some of the things that I like about what that did for me was it seemed to fix some of the things up here in the tip here. It seemed to help me with these jagged corners here. It also helped with smoothing some of the straight lines out here for me. So these lines here are not so jagged. So it seems to have done a little bit of everything, and it seems to and it helped smooth the image out a little bit. Kind of remove some of that really nasty jaggedness. So that's another thing that you can use in order to maybe take away some of that that jaggedness. Now, I have another image here. I'm going to grab this Superman logo, and here's a really good example of how when not to use that particular feature. So I'm going to go to bitmap. I'm going to resample this guy. We'll do the same settings basically. And it's kind of smoothed everything out. But one of the things that I found is that we're going to introduce a different one here. Actually, let's just use the Bezier first, and then we'll go on to the next one here. So we'll take both of these and we'll vectorize them both with the Bezier to kind of get a side-by-side comparison here. So what you can see is that sometimes that feature is not always going to help you out. So you can see here that some of that, it kind of almost ruined it because that the Bezier tool is picking up more. It's not adding enough pixels, and it's actually adding more distortion. So sometimes that can be a good thing, like for an example of this guy over here, but in this Superman logo, it really didn't do us any favors. So we're gonna not do that with this one. This one here, I'm gonna go back to the original. We're gonna delete this guy, and we are gonna go back to the last, or not the last one, but the enhanced curves and enhanced corners. These are essentially the same. The difference between curves and corners is that this one has a predefined setting to it, but if I click on this one, I get this little slider that comes out. This allows me to more specifically define what kinds of things I want and what kinds of things I do not. So I can see here, I can slide these over. By default, this is kind of where they're at, but I can tell the software to run. If I can see that this is kind of a jagged image, I can say, no, I want you to pass over those objects more often than not. I can do more sharp corners. So anytime there's a rounded area where it might come to a point, I might want it to sharpen it up versus rounding it off. Or little glitches like this in a smooth line, I can increase that or decrease that. The more you slide these to the right, the more tolerance or the more permission you're giving the software to change the design. So do be aware of that. When you are doing this, the more you slide it to the right, the more the design will get changed if it so sees fit to do so. So I'm gonna pick this here. Kind of played around with that. So hit OK. Let's see what we get. Again, I'm going to move the bitmap out of the way, and what I've got here is a pretty good representation of that logo. Despite how bad this was, I still got really sharp corners in a lot of the spots where it vectorized these. There's a couple places where it still left rounded corners, but those are pretty big rounded corners. And the only thing that I'm really kind of struggling with is this arch up here. It looks like this blurriness up here really caused a problem with that. What I would probably end up doing in this case is you might do several different vectorizing tricks and maybe combine some of the artwork, or you may just decide to come back with your point editing tools and just redo that if that might work better. So let's go back in here, and just for sake of fun, let's just slide everything all the way over here and see what this does for us. You can see if I just leave everything highlighted here, what it does, how much it's actually removed. So it's like cut this entire corner off, which is not ideal. Here it's stayed pretty good, and you can see it's kind of keeping that, but there are some spots up here like it sliced off an entire area up here. So this may or may not be a good thing. If I were to grab this and move this out of the way, you can kind of really tell that it's a super, super soft image. It's like there's some sharp corners, but it just kind of seems lumpy and not ideal. So you can kind of play around with that a little bit. And honestly, when I'm doing a vectorize like this, I find myself doing this multiple times and kind of just testing a few different settings and see what I like and see what I don't, and then going back and forth a little bit. There's nothing wrong with that. Also, there's not anything wrong with vectorizing multiple pieces like this and saying, man, I really like this setting here. So look how well this came out. This little guy right here, this came out perfect. I really like that. But over here, it kind of came out, meh, this corner over here is lacking. So, I mean, there's nothing to say that I could vectorize things multiple times and say, well, get rid of that, and I'm going to place this one in here because that one's way better. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I've done this multiple times, especially with a file that's really bad shape, that's almost indistinguishable. Multiple methods can sometimes help you out quite a bit. So mixing and matching is also not a bad idea. So that's the center line. One other file that we want to take a look at is this crazy fish over here. One of the advantages over the centerline trace, or not the centerline, but the auto trace, is that the auto trace is typically going to be very, very sharp and very, very direct at trying to convert the objects. So if I were to vectorize this object, it's going to be very literal for the most part. I can change some of the settings for it not to do that, but you can see, man, that looks very abrasive. There's a lot of nasty stuff right in here it's basically image pixel per pixel, an immediate copy of it. Whereas if I come in here and do, for example, a Bezier or an enhanced curves, let's just try this one here, you're going to get a little bit of smoothing that happens, and that's going to help your image quality out just a little bit. So if we take a look at the original image here, kind of zoom in, we can tell that some of the smoothing has happened here. It's not quite as jagged. There's areas, for example, up here in this little area, up in this area, and up in here where it's kind of smoothed some of that off. It's still pretty jagged, but it's not, it's a little bit smoother. So depending on what you want to do with it now, I would say that this is probably a little more usable just because you're not going to have so many sharp edges, especially if you were going to plan on like cutting this out with a plotter. This image would be much better because of the smoother edges. If you zoom in here, a lot of these edges are smooth and rounded off. Where if you look at this guy over here, a lot of these edges are very sharp. And so cutting this out with a plotter would be a disaster over here. Whereas this, it's still going to be difficult, but it's not going to be near as bad because you have a lot more smoother movements. So sometimes with a file like this, going to the Bezier option or the enhanced curves or enhanced corners might give you a better result just because of the amount of smoothing that you can apply to it. So let's grab that. Then the last thing we want to kind of take a look at is color vectorization. Your typical way of doing color vectorization has always been by using the Vectorize color trace. And this is a really powerful tool. Don't get me wrong. I love using this one, but in a minute here, we're going to show a different alternative. So I'm going to highlight it again. And here it allows me to choose how many colors I want it to vectorize. So I could vectorize only 2 colors, and I can kind of shift through here and just get this to the point where I like how many colors it's actually done. One of the things though about this is that you'll notice that it recognizes all of these colors. These colors can be merged together. Essentially what these colors are is if we were to zoom into this file real close, see here? Now this is really, really far zoomed in, but what these colors are is that they're the shades of colors in between the transition between the black and the green and the white and the red and so on. And so we're getting a lot of different inputs there. So what I might want to do is, and this is where it becomes, it's a little bit difficult to do it this way, and this is why I'm going to show you the other way here in a minute, but I can grab all these colors and start merging these colors together. Say, you know what, all these colors here, oops, I accidentally held down shift. I can just click on all these colors like this and say, all these colors are technically the same color, and I can merge these together. I can also pick all these pinkish colors because I know those are all transitions between white and red. I can say, well, merge those together with the red. Just have to make sure my black arrow is underneath it of the red, and it's going to merge these colors into that one. And then now I've got several green colors here that I could merge together. One of the things is that I don't like about this particular setting is that it can be a little tricky to kind of get everything right if you have to undo several times. It doesn't allow you to undo very much. It does a good job of vectorizing. So let's just clear it all out. And let's just let it run its default course. I'm going to vectorize, color trace, and let's just say we do all the colors and apply. So what it's going to do is it's going to give us some weird things like this, right? Where that transition between the blue and the red might not have been that great. And so now I've got these conflicting lines here. I would say that to solve this, we're going to grab this and move it aside. And I'm just going to take this. Actually, before we do that, I'm just going to make a copy in case we need it. I'm going to go into bitmap. I'm going to vectorize. I'm going to go to color. This brings up an interesting little window right here. And what it's going to allow me to do now is that I'm going to be able to select all the areas or all the colors manually. So any transition color is not going to show up. So I'm going to hit my red and my green. Let me zoom in a little bit here so I make sure and get right in the middle. Look at that. I also want the white and the black. I can posterize this, and basically what that does is it kind of gives me a preview of what it's going to look like. I can merge colors by selecting multiple colors if I need to and merge them together. So if I look at this and this one, I can highlight those together and merge them so that they're one color. I could do the same thing with these blacks here, merge those colors. And I can define how many colors I want. Maybe I want 7 or 5 or 6 or whatever. I'm going to vectorize it now. And the nice thing is that it's given me a nice, crisp line. Now, obviously, it's not perfect. There are going to be some things that you might have to come in and fix, but these are super minor in comparison to what I have to do over here on this file. And now I can just grab these letters, and they're individually selectable. And I can grab this green background, and I've got all parts of this file right here. I've got the centers of the letters. Everything has been separated out for me. So if I need to edit one little piece, it's not a big deal. So I really like this newer, this other option called color, just because it gives me a few better options, and the interface, I like it a little bit better. And I love how it creates all these as separate layers, whereas this particular tool, it does the same exact thing. If you were to take this apart, they're all actually masked objects. And so that's kind of one of the differences too, is that doing it this method will give you individual addressable pieces versus sometimes when you do it this way, sometimes you'll get, in this particular case, because we have colors stacked on top of each other, it masks them out. So, it can be a good thing or a bad thing, depend on what you're doing. I like this one a little bit better just because it's a little easier, a little bit nicer to look at, a little easier to click on those things. It's not as difficult to highlight those colors and whatnot. So those are kind of some of the quick and easy ways to do vectorizing. Honestly, it comes down to just playing with it some. Change some of those settings. If you're doing the color trace as well, there are options in here, for example. So if you need to have noise reduction corners, you've got the same settings that you do in the auto trace. They're just in that second tab. So yeah, different options. Honestly, it's a combination of tools is what I use, and in order to get the correct graphic. And this will be helpful with business cards, anything, images that you get that are blurry or that they don't have the original graphic. This happens a lot with people who build websites. They may have a graphic on their website, but they don't have the original artwork. This can be super helpful. And don't be afraid to use a combination of these tools to build a graphic if you need to. And then with the use of your point editing tools, we can simply correct some of these minor issues fairly easily, and it wouldn't be a problem using some of these tools right here. So we can do that, and you're much farther along than you would have been before. Are there any questions on these tools or anything else specifically?
We had some confusion on the time, and so they missed it. So I just wanted to let you know that we are recording the webinar, and so we'll post that recording. I'll send that link to you as soon as we get it up on our YouTube page so that you can see it as soon as we have that ready for you. So let me scroll through. I think we had a few questions a little bit earlier. Let's see. Maggie said, once I vectorize and go to cut it, it keeps cutting over and over on the vinyl, even though it's set for one pass. Ends up cutting it completely out of the vinyl and tearing it. How do I get it to just cut normal? It was a rounded corner.
Okay. There could be several things going on there. One thing to note is, let's see if we can tear this file apart here a little bit. Sometimes what can happen is, actually the best way that I can kind of explain this is I've seen this before when doing outlines. So sometimes what can happen with vectorizing is, let's take some text here, is what can happen is the layers can sometimes get overlapping with each other. So for example, if we do an outline on an object, if there's a backing behind it, that'll fix some of those issues. But if there's no backing behind the color, sometimes it can cause cuts. So if I were to try and cut this, it would seem like it would be all okay, right? But if I separate it, we can see that there's actually a hole inside of this graphic. Whereas if I take a look at this green, for example, it's not just an outline, it's a full backing piece. And so sometimes that can be a problem, is having whether the graphic meets up with another graphic. If you have two objects like this, like two colors or two different things like this that are close together, sometimes the lines can be shared and you might get duplicate cuts there. We'd have to maybe take a look at the file too and see, but that would be the first thing that I would think of that comes to mind. Other things too can be artifacting with lines and whatnot. Hopefully there wouldn't be overlapping lines, but there could be. Another one of those reasons why I like to use this option over here with the color is because when I vectorize this image here, there's going to be lots of like little micro pieces. Let's see if I can go back to where I had that image. There's going to be little micro pieces like this that sometimes are so thin that in this case they're super obvious, but in other cases they may not be as obvious and might cause double lines. So let's say that this little green outline was a little bit thinner. You might actually get like a double cut right there because you actually have two colors kind of right next to each other. So that's where when you're doing a color vectorization, similar to this one, it's not always ideal to just go max on the colors. You don't want to always just have it at max colors because it's going to create vector lines for each one of these colors. So the ideal thing would be is merge the colors together or simply reduce the amount of colors that are available for cutting. And then that would help with that. So try those couple things and see if that helps. If that doesn't help, let us know. Give us a call at our tech support. All of our guys are very familiar with vectorizing, and so they could help you out and see if there's something specific that's going on in your circumstance.
Awesome. Thank you, Aaron. We have a handful more questions. One by Will. He said, are BMP the only raster files able to be resampled?
That's a good question. I believe, oops, let's get out of the tool there. I believe that this was, hold on, let me check my desktop real quick here. All of the ones that I did today, so this fish here was a PNG. The spear actually was a JPEG. And yeah, the Superman logo is also a PNG. So you should be able to do it with any graphic. Let's just take this one here. So the fish was a PNG. We should be able to posterize this as well, or rasterize, or resample it. So you should be able to do it on any one of them.
Okay, perfect.
It
Looks like
shouldn't
we had,
matter.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
All right, looks like we had several questions about gradients, specifically how do you vector gradient images?
Ooh, that's a good one. All right, so vectorized gradients. The short answer is you may not be able to. Um, the problem with gradients is that obviously it's a mixture of colors, and the way that the software tends to understand or how it vectorizes something is based on the contrast of one color versus another. So when you have a gradient, uh, there's no real solid shift between one color or another, and so it tends to not do it accurately. So I would say gradients really are kind of off limits in terms of vectorization, um, because it's going to be very difficult to control where that's going to happen. And so if I were to make an example here, um, with a gradient color, let's pull up my fill stroke editor. Here we go. And let's go to gradient. And let's go ahead and just rasterize this. Okay, so now we've got a rasterized gradient. If I were to try and color trace this, this is kind of what I'm going to get. Um, if I increase the amount of colors, it may work. Now this is a pretty even gradient, so it's kind of chopping it up in sections like this, which maybe if that's what you want, that might be ideal. But um, it's it's okay. It doesn't really kind of do a whole lot. So I mean, I've got my different sections, but um, if I were wanting to keep that as one big piece, it really won't of the because of the differentiation between the colors. It's pretty much just finding a spot and cutting it in half. Now, if this were like a radial gradient, what would happen is that it would start to if there's any inconsistencies in the color, you're just going to start getting these like jagged lines all the way across, and it's not going to evenly do it. Um, so gradients are kind of not one of those things you would really be able to vectorize.
Okay, thank you. Let's see here. Scott asked, how would you color fill the wireframe vector? And Aaron Downing said to press Control M.
Oh, that's answering the question, or?
Yeah, so I just didn't know if you
Okay.
had anything else you wanted to add to that, or
No, that should work.
okay. And Diane said, off topic, but is there a video on adding Adobe filters for fonts? Do you know if we have anything like that?
I don't know if we have a video or not. If there is, it would be under the knowledge base. It wouldn't be a bad idea, but the way that you do that is there's two things you have to do. You have to go to the preferences and go to file paths. By default, it's set to the Adobe plugins folder, but that's not where you want it to go. You actually want it to go to a folder called, so I'm just going to navigate to it here real quick. So you're going to go to program files. I think I'm on the desktop here. So this PC, you'll go to C drive, program files, x86. You're going to go into the SAI folder, and you're going to find this Adobe plugins folder. So inside of the Flexi folder, there's going to be an Adobe plugins folder. You need to change the path to that. Then that's the same folder path that you should be installing the Adobe filters into. If you have those two things correctly done, it should work. Well, third thing that you want to notice also, just an FYI, is you have to have the 32-bit version of the Alien Scan or iCandy or Adobe filters. They cannot be a 64-bit. Just be aware of that. So 32-bit plugins, make sure that they go in that folder, and then just make sure and change the Adobe plugins folder to that folder inside of the SAI, and then that will bring them in. Again, if you have questions or you get stuck on it, give us a call. We can get that set up. It's something we do pretty commonly, and they will show up under bitmap Adobe filters.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Looks like we have a question from Brian. He wants to know, how do we import a PNG?
Okay, yeah, good question. So we're just going to go to the File menu here, and best way is to go to Import. If you have it set to all readable, it will see a PNG, but if you're wanting to sort it out, I can come in here and choose PNG, and now it will sort out my PNG files. So here's my Superman logo, and then it'll put it in there for you.
Perfect. Okay, and then we had a concern from Jim. He said that his options for, I believe is for bitmaps, are grayed out and he can't get to them or open them.
Okay, one thing to kind of, I believe that if there is a transparency on top of a bitmap, sometimes that can interfere with the bitmap tools. So one thing that you can do is click on your bitmap that you've pulled in. You can go to the third tab in your Design Central, and you can remove transparencies. This one has one, and it doesn't seem to be a problem, but some will cause issues. Another thing that you might have is you also might have a mask on it too. So there might be an effect or something on the file that's causing it to not be recognized as a bitmap. So you could right-click on the file, and if there was a mask on it or some other thing, you would see the unmask button here at the bottom of your right-click menu. So in this
Okay.
case, if I can hit Remove Transparency, and it basically removes it, and now it's no longer transparent. It covers up all the objects. So I would try that and see if that helps. Those are the things I can think of right off the top of my head.
All right, thank you. So we did have a couple questions about your fish there. People are
Yes.
wondering where they can find the fish and if there's anything we can do to clean it up even a little further to get more cleaner lines on that.
Well, this is actually just a screenshot of another image from one of our videos that I made years ago. So I just kind of held on to it. Um, I'm more than happy to send it out. I don't know if this is a copyrighted thing or not, but I don't think it is, but who knows. But in order to clean this up a little bit better, we could do several things. We could try the resampling, and we could try something like that and see how that goes. Let's just see what it does for us here. This is a pretty pixelized image in terms of it's not. I didn't think that was going to do a whole lot for us, but I thought we'd try. The other thing we can do is we could probably just go crazy on the enhanced corners and tell it to run over a lot of stuff like this. And that would probably help us quite a bit. So that's a little bit better. Oops, I went the wrong direction. So that's a little bit better. So you can kind of see it's removed some of the edginess off of some of the fins and stuff like that. So you could continue to do that. we could probably just go max out here and see what that does. Let's pull this up just a little bit and maybe go a little bit down here and go smoother edges on it.
All right. And Raul
There you
also
go.
suggested filtering reduce noise as well.
Yeah, that
That is an option.
also, yeah, you could do that as well. If you were just doing the if you were doing the auto trace option, you could set the noise reduction to most. Probably do rounded corners, and then increase this a little bit here, increase or decrease the tolerance if you're just doing the auto trace. Since I'm doing the enhanced corners, that's going to be a little bit different. But here's the best it was able to kind of do. So still kind of crazy. If I were really interested in this particular file, I think this is more of a, this was designed pixelated like this as an artistic type form. That was kind of the intent of this graphic. So it wasn't really ever intended to be smooth. But what I would probably start doing is I would get it as good as I could using the vectorization tools like this. And then I would start using my point editing tools to fix some of the problems that I didn't like. So I could come in here and start using my optimized by 3-point curve, and I could just start, clicking on some of these points and kind of making some of these fins a little bit smoother, and things like that. And I could easily do that like this. And so now I can come in here and now it removes some of the edginess of the graphic, but this is, if this were something I was really planning on using, that I might do something like that to kind of clean it up a little bit. Start using get it as close as I could, and then start using my point editing tools to make the modifications that I wanted to fix some of these issues. And you could get this graphic pretty well cleaned up in 5 or 10 minutes using the point editing tools. Wouldn't be too bad.
Okay. Thank you. And it looks like we're just about out of time for today. If you did have any other questions that we weren't able to get to today, please send those to you can email those to our tech support. Aaron, could you type that up on the screen there so everyone has that?
Yeah.
And just wanted to let you know that we will be having another webinar. We have it scheduled for December 10th, same time. So it'll be 10 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. And we'll be discussing how to use the auto serialize feature in Flexi. So if you do have any questions on that, please attend that webinar. We're happy to go over all of the questions that you may have. And if you do have any other suggestions for webinars that you'd like to see, we're putting together our schedule for next year. So either go ahead and type it in the comments or send us an email, and we'd be happy to take a look at those. We want to make sure that we can help you out, make things a little quicker and easier for you using Flexi. So once again, thank you all for attending.
I do have one other thing I want to add in. Sorry, and I forgot to mention that to you. If you guys are interested in training, Flexi does have a new training program that we've introduced that's done by myself. And you can purchase 2 hours or 4 hour blocks of training. And what we do is if you buy 2 hours, then we do 2 1-hour sessions with you, and this one-on-one. So it would be me and you and whatever file you want to work on or whatever topic you want to talk about. So if you want to go over this stuff in detail, we can just spend an hour going over vectorizing some files. Or if you want to learn how to do print and cut, or you have one particular thing that you struggle with or you want more training on, we have that available now. That can all be, you can call our customer service to get a hold of them to purchase training, or you can also go to our website, and there's a form you can fill out if you're interested in training.
Yes, so you can go to thinksai.com/training for more details. And that is something that we make a recording of, so you can also review the training whenever you like. So, and this webinar as well is being recorded, so we will post that to our YouTube channel and send you all the links so you can review it whenever you like.
The
Aaron,
website,
can you type it up there?
yeah, is www.thinksai.com.
/training. Okay, wonderful. Thank you all for attending. I hope you have a great day, and we will see you next month.
All right, bye.